Julie said I'm a professional trainer. Yes, I do. That's what my job is. And while the word professional is in there, I like to be real. I have to be real, or I can't function. I'm not always the most prim and proper when I speak, the most professional when I speak, so I'm telling you that up front. I'm not a Bible scholar. I do like to study the Bible, and I'm not a scholar, so keep that in mind as well. I take lots of notes. We were talking before we started today about some of us are natured in a way that we like to have decisions made and we like to have things buttoned up and structured. And I said to that person, well, I'm just the opposite. I like to hang out in that land of, oh, it's okay to leave it open-ended and unbuttoned and all that. So I'm sharing that to say my printer at home is broken, so I had to have someone print my notes off for me. And so I've had my notes printed, and I'm still like gathering information and adding stuff to what I wanted to say today. So I'm going to show you, give you a little peek at what my notes look like. This is what my notes look like at work when I speak as well, and the girls that I work with say, I don't know how you function. I don't know how you do that. So just know that I've got lots of notes, lots of sticky notes, and if I get tangled up, just bear with me. It'll be okay. So you can see the title here, Love, the Key to Ministry. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this came about, and then we'll get started. So I was asked to speak today a good many months ago, and I'm a professional procrastinator. How many of y'all are professional procrastinators? I see a few hands. So, I've been thinking for months, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to dig into from the Word? And I had a whole stack of ideas, something on fear. Certainly the days and times that we're living, we could all get our heads around fear and how do we get help from the Word around that. And I had one that was titled The Fiery Darts. What are they and what can you do about them? And I just couldn't get settled. Well, I was riding down the road one day listening to the radio, and that song, The Proof of Your Love, came on. Are y'all familiar with that song? Let my life be the proof of your love. And I was like, man, that's good. That song could almost be an outline. So that led me to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which we're probably all pretty familiar with. And I said I'm not a Bible scholar, right? So I read behind Warren Wiersbe a lot, and I love his commentary. And so as I began to read through what Warren Wiersbe had to say about 1 Corinthians chapter 13, I was like, a little different from what I thought if we look at the context of the chapter and what Paul was actually trying to accomplish here. So it's pretty interesting. So I don't want you to shut me off when you see that love, the key in ministry or to ministry, because you might be sitting there saying, well, I don't have a ministry. I'm not involved in a ministry. And I say, yes, you do. You've got family, you've got friends, you've got kids, you've got spouses, you've got people that you minister to. You might be involved in a ministry here. You might be involved in something outside of this church. But at any rate, we all have some type of a ministry. And so Wiersbe actually says, few chapters have been taken out of context, suffered more misinterpretation and misapplication than this one. So most of us do know this chapter is the love chapter, right? Just like that song I was listening to. It's beautiful. Yes, it's about love. And there's a little more that we can dig into when we really look into the context. That Paul was dealing with some problems in the Corinthian church. And some of those, they had a lot of stuff going on that was not too becoming of them. And you can see some of them here. There was abuse of the gift of tongues. There was some division going on. There was some envy going on, especially in the area of the spiritual gifts of others. There was selfishness, impatience with one another. and some behavior that was going on that was pretty disgracing to the Lord. And so Paul had some things to say about that. And so we can glean from what Paul was sharing to this Corinthian church. And Wiersbe says, once again, I'm probably going to say a lot, what Wiersbe said this, because I think it's so good. He had a lot of good things to say. He says the only way spiritual gifts can be used well is when we're motivated by love. And I thought that was a pretty good statement, and it really got me thinking about some things that I'll share with you here in a minute. So Paul explained 3 characteristics of Christian love in this chapter. We're going to look at all 3 of them, and we're going to start with love is enriching. So what does enriching mean? It means it adds value. So let's look at the verses. I'll just go ahead and read those. Though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not charity, I'm become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I'm nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. So Paul mentions 5 gifts here. He mentions tongues, prophecy, knowledge, faith, giving, or sacrifice. And I'm not going to get into the details of all of these spiritual gifts. You can research that on your own. That's not what we're here to talk about today, not the individual gifts. But look at what Paul says. He says if we're operating in our gifts without love, it's just a bunch of noise. It's a clanging cymbal. Think about what that sounds like. You know, what would that sound like if I was up here talking and there was a clanging cymbal going on? Linda, were you getting ready to say something? No. I thought, it sounded like you were going to say what?
I said nothing.
Yeah, right. It's because you can't hear anything, right? We're nothing. It profits nothing, right? And as we go through these verses, we're going to see the word charity over and over again. And I researched the definition of charity, and without going into a lot of details about the origins of the word, it would probably bore most of you to tears. Here it means love, a brotherly love. I like to research words and what they mean and where we get our words from. And in fact, I was talking with Justin the other week about just reading different commentaries and different versions of the Bible and words and all that. And he said, Lisa, you're kind of a geek, aren't you? I said, yeah, I guess I am. I like this kind of stuff. So just know that we are talking about brotherly love here, right? And operating in love within our spiritual gifts and in our ministries. So as I began to study this chapter, I've already said it struck me that, it meant something a little different than what I thought, right? So I was like, what does this mean? What does it mean to use our spiritual gifts without love? What would that look like in the things we do, the things we see, the things we experience in our own lives? And as I really thought about that, pondered, reflected on what I do, God brought 2 things to my mind. So I'm going to give you 2 examples here of what operating in a ministry or a spiritual gift might look like if we're in it kind of out of duty, instead of out of love. And the first one's kind of funny. So this happened a good many years ago when I was at a different church than this one, and my best friend who I went to church with, her spiritual gifts were encouragement and teaching. So she had become the director of our junior church at the time. And she told me I could share this, by the way. She said, you can even say my name if you want to. Her name's Sue. And she thinks it's funny, too, now that we know what we know and we look back on it. But Sue, here she was, the director of the junior church, and she said, I don't want people to think I'm prideful, and, I've got this title now, and I really think that I need to get involved in a ministry that's different, really different from what I've done in the past. So lo and behold, she joins the committee I call it the Set Up Cleanup Committee. I don't know what its official name was, but you know, they would set up for events, get the food ready, put it out, do the cleanup, all that kind of stuff. So Sue, you had to know. I wish I should have invited her. I don't know why I didn't, but anyway. So she's on this committee now, and people are, I remember this vividly. I can see it in my mind. Like, people would bring food in, you know, to go to the kitchen, to be put away, and then be heated up later, and she'd be out there. How are you doing, honey? How's your mama doing? Well, let me tell you what I found out about that, blah, blah. And, you know, she's just encouraging people as they come in and bring their food. Do you think she's back there heating up food, getting food? No. She's out there doing what she does, right? Encouraging people. So don't you know that committee was ready to see her leave at the end of the year? Now, I don't know if that's true, but I feel like it probably was, because I'm sure she wasn't doing a whole lot of setting up, cleaning up, heating up green beans and all that kind of stuff. And it's really hilarious, right? So we say this at work all the time. Stay in your lane. That's what that reminds me of, right? Stay in your lane, Sue. You need to be over there directing junior church, and you need to be out there encouraging people like you know you're good at. So there's another story I want to tell you about, which is not so funny. It hadn't been for me anyway, because it's about me. And Julie knows all about this. She's heard all about it. Do you know where I'm going, Julie? So, as most of you in this room probably know, I began leading our Griefshare Ministry here at the church some years ago. Miss Julia, that had led it for years and years, actually, I think she's the one that started it here at Central. She was ready to step down and let someone else take it over. And so she approached several people. One of them was me. And she said, hey, just, come to a few sessions and see what you think, and let me know, if you might be interested in taking this ministry over. So I went to a couple, and I was like, my spiritual gift is the gift of mercy. And I know that. I've known it for years. And maybe this is how I use my spiritual gift. I've never really understood, how do you really use the gift of mercy? You can kind of feel what other people are feeling. You can sense it. You can feel it as if it's happening to you. So I thought, maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. So I did take it over a couple years ago. Well, I can't say that I loved it. I wanted to do things the way Miss Julia did. I had all these notes of, this is the way you start the session. You say these things each week. You do these things each week. And it really was weighing on me. And I was like, I don't know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing here. So I've spent probably the last year and a half talking to all kinds of different people, Julie being one of them, about, I just don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. I don't know. And so I made an appointment with the dean, and I said, I had it all planned out, right, what I was going to tell him. I really don't think this is my thing. I don't think I'm good at it. I think the ministry's suffering because of it. I don't think the other leaders that are in there with me think I'm good at it. I just, I don't think this is where I need to be. So I had it all planned out. Well, that's about the time I started studying this chapter. And so I thought, as I started reading this whole idea about if we're doing our ministry without love being our motive, or if we're trying to operate in our spiritual gift without love being our motive, it may not be that great, right? It might be a tinkling cymbal, or it may not be worth anything. So it really was just hitting me between the eyes. And it's like the skies parted, right? The Lord spoke to me about this, and I thought, I've been very successful with what I do at work. I teach leadership skills to groups of people. And I do it from a place of, I also need to tell you, I'm a crybaby, so if I get choked up, don't worry, it's okay. I do it from a place of I want to make their lives better at work and at home, period. That's what I want to do. That's why I do what I do at work. And I thought, why have I not been thinking about Griefshare that way? That's what it's meant to do, is make the lives of people better and to help get them through, the grief that they're experiencing. So still had that meeting with Dean. I said, okay, first I need to tell you where I've been with this, and now I'm going to tell you where I am with it now. So I want to do another cycle of Griefshare, see how it goes. I really feel energized. I'm ready. I'm ready for this. And so I'm going to push the pause button on that story. And here in just a little bit, before I finish up today, I'll tell you how our first session of Griefshare went. One person in here already knows how it went. And anyway, I'll tell you that in a few minutes. And I love the way, once again, Wiersbe puts it, ministry without love cheapens both the minister and those who are touched by it. That really struck me too. But ministry with love enriches the whole church. Love enriches all it touches. I love that. So let's look at this next characteristic. Love is edifying. And I'll probably spend most of the time here in this one because it's a characteristic that I feel is very important to us, especially in the days we're living. It was important to the Corinthians, and it's also important for us too. The purpose of spiritual gifts is for the building up of the church, which means we have to think more of others than we do ourselves, and it requires love. So what does edifying mean? We probably all know it means to build up. And how do we build each other up? We do it by loving each other in this manner that we're getting ready to look at in these next several verses that Paul provided for us. So let's see what they have to say about love and loving each other. And as we go through these, I want you to do a little reflecting. Think about how you're currently showing love and displaying love to others through your spiritual gift, ministries that you're involved in, and where do you have room to improve? How are you currently doing? Where are you excelling, and where do you have room to improve? All right, first thing we see here, charity suffereth long and is kind, charity envieth not, charity vaunteth is not itself, and it's not puffed up. So we're going to look at each one of these individually. Love is long-suffering is the first thing we're going to look at. It's patient. Now, who in here has a ton of patience? Raise your hand if you have a ton of patience. I don't see a hand. I actually have a lot of patience. People say, I don't understand how it's like you have the patience of Job. Well, I do. That's one thing I do have a lot of. So I'll ask you now, nobody raised their hand, so now I'll say, who does I have a lot of patience, and you're willing to admit it? I see a couple of hands and some heads nodding, yeah. So think about patience as it relates to others. Think about that person that grates on your last nerve. Y'all have one of those? We probably all do. Are you patiently loving that person? Reflective question. Remember, I told you I'm going to have you reflecting. It's hard. I know it is. Believe me, I know it is. And yet, we're told to patiently love others, right? Love is kind. We could use more kindness in the world today, and even in the church, right? We could use more kindness in the church. I know you've heard people say, some of the meanest people I've ever known in my life are Christians. Have y'all heard that before? We all have, right? That's sad. It shouldn't be that way. We should be loving our church family. We should be loving everyone. As a matter of fact, let's look at Romans 12:10 here. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love in honor, preferring one another. The Bible tells us in more places than that. That's one that I picked out that spoke to me. We should be loving everyone. We should be kind to everyone. What else do we have here? Love doesn't envy the green-eyed monster. Do y'all struggle with jealousy? And I see a couple of heads nodding yes. I see a couple saying no. And that's good if you don't. I do. I mean, and it gripes me that I do. I mean, it slaps me in the face pretty often. You know, I see something on Facebook that a couple of friends are out, you know, having a good time, went shopping, whatever, and I'm like, I wonder why they didn't ask me. I mean, you know, what in the world? That's the first thing that pops in my mind. I don't know where that comes from. Or maybe I'm talking with a friend who's going to the gym every day, and you know, she looks great. She's in the best shape of her life, and I'm like, wish I looked like that. Well, I could if I went to the gym every day, right, and put some effort into it. I mean, when I realize that that jealousy is rising up in me, I think, what in the world, where is that coming from? What is wrong with me? And it's really just one of those things that the devil and his crew gets after me with. And I know it. And I have to be very careful with that. How about this one? Love doesn't vaunt itself. I didn't really know what that meant, just being honest. It means to boast, to make a vain display of one's own worth, to brag. Pride prompts us to do this. It puffs us up. Right. As a matter of fact, 1 Corinthians 8:1 tells us knowledge puffs us up. It says it right there in the Word. But love edifies. Again, it builds up. And so we're not to think of ourselves more highly than others. And then verse 5, love doesn't behave itself unseemly. That means not fit, indecent. I think we probably all know what indecent means, right? Hopefully none of us are doing indecent things. Love doesn't seek her own. That means we're just as concerned with the needs of others as we are our own. Remember, I said reflect on yourself and how you're doing here. How are y'all doing as we're going through this reflecting? Doing okay? I see a couple of people going, yeah, it's hard. Reflection is really hard. And it's good because we can't do anything about it until we admit that we've got some room to grow, right? So that's good. Keep it up. Love isn't easily provoked, so it doesn't have a bad temper. I don't really struggle with this one either, but I know those who do. So I saw a couple of faces whenever I said that. So I'm going to assume there's a couple of people in here that struggle with your temper. Controlling one's temper is not always easy. We actually, for those of you that have known me for any length of time, you know that I do a lot of work with personality typing at work. And so there's certain personalities that just do have a hard time managing temper, right? As a matter of fact, there's one personality typing instrument we do that's called color energies. And there's 4 color energies: red, blue, green, and yellow. And so the red one, you can imagine, is the fiery red. That's what it's called. And so one of my peers is, it's funny because she's a redhead, and her leading color energy is that fiery red. And she talks about her temper, you know, and how hard it is to manage, and it can just go, you know, up just in a skinny second. And it's not an excuse. We can have all the excuses in the world, right? Well, that's just my personality. That's how God made me. I'm sorry, but I've got a bad temper. Yeah, we can say that, and it's not an excuse. We have to learn to manage our temper. We read it right here. Love isn't easily provoked. Again, something to reflect on. Love thinks no evil. Here it means doesn't keep a record of wrongs, is what I found in my studies. I was reading a story about a man who was a professed Christian who actually kept a notebook. In that notebook, he kept a list of all the people who had wronged him. Now, don't you know that man was probably pretty miserable? And as I read that, I thought, I know someone that does this to, someone that I'm pretty close to. Maybe not an actual notebook, but I'm telling you right now, the person does not forget when they're wronged. And it keeps them all worked up all the time. It causes them to never forget, and they don't let the other person who wronged them forget it either. And it really makes me sad because it really seems like it keeps that person from true happiness. And that's what it can do when we're not forgiving other people. In fact, Ephesians 4:32 tells us to be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, forgave us, right? Is there someone you need to forgive? Something else for us to reflect on. Verse 6, love doesn't rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. What brings joy to your heart? When you hear something good about someone, does it make your heart happy for that person? I hope it does. When you hear something bad about someone, do you say, well, I knew that was coming. Told you, right? It was just a matter of time before that was going to happen. I've been telling you all along. We shouldn't find ourselves rejoicing when other people fail. And I mean, I'll be the first one to say I've been guilty of that. I know I have, to get involved in a conversation like that. And that's not becoming of us. In fact, I was reading again, Wiersbe said that, just like Noah's sons did for their father, we should seek to hide the sins of others. I've never really thought about it like that. And then help them make things right. I thought that was pretty good. Verse 7, love bears all things. I don't know if any of you ever listened to J. Vernon McGee. Julie, I know you do. I see a couple of heads nodding. I love him. He said about this verse, he said, it's like holding up an umbrella for others. I thought that was a pretty cool visual. We're holding an umbrella up over someone. Who needs it? Romans 15:1 tells us, we then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not please ourselves. In other words, the strong one is morally obligated to take the initiative to bear up the weaker one, to bear with the weaker one in the thing that they're bothered with. Instead of talking about the weaknesses or the struggles of other people, we should be bearing it with them, for them. I told you I've been working on this study for a while. Here's where I might need my tissue. And last week during the service, I began looking around people, that were near me, sitting near me, just on the several pews around me. And the Lord just began bringing to my mind the things that people were dealing with, things that I knew about. And just think about all the things I don't know about. Struggles, disappointments, losses, concerns about children, all those things that we all have going on, right? And maybe we don't share with everyone. Maybe we just share it with a few people. Maybe we don't share it with anyone. But we all have a lot of things that we're dealing with in life. And I mean, I couldn't stand it. I just had to go fall on my face at the altar. And first of all, ask forgiveness for being self-absorbed and not being concerned about other people. And then to pray for those who I know are going through the tough times right now. I mean, that's what we should be doing. Lifting each other up in prayer and letting them know, right, that we care. And finding out if we can do anything. I mean, often there's nothing we can do. But letting them know, I see you. And I'm praying for you. And I care. Sometimes that's all they need, right? It's holding that umbrella up over our brothers and sisters in Christ. Now, let's see what time. I ask you to reflect on some of these things, right, as we went through. And so I want to give you just a couple of minutes at the table. I think most of you are sitting with some other people at your table. If not, maybe you can move around and just have a conversation at your table about what has really struck you as we looked through these verses in this edifying portion about what do I need to do? You know, we said half the battle is admitting it, right? So just have a little conversation. I'm going to give you a few minutes and talk about what you know you need to work on and how you might be able to work on that. For those of you who have joined us online, if you want to do some reflecting and maybe have a conversation with yourself right now, our ladies are having some good conversations at the table, and we'll continue shortly. Okay, it sounds like y'all were having some really good discussion at the table. So, don't know if anybody's willing to share any of the things that you talked about, but what were some things that you shared at your tables? You need some patience, okay? Yeah.
I was talking about love and action.
Love and
It's not
actions.
the love with words.
Yes.
It's the love and action.
Hmm.
And this can make it
We've got to put some feet to our words.
people when you know you are not people thinking the same way. Contact.
Yes, yes. Yes, especially with people that think very differently than we do. Yeah, I agree. Good, thank you. How about this? I did. How about this other table? Did y'all have anything? And you don't have to share. Patience was pretty common. Not easily provoked. Okay, yeah. How about y'all? Did you have anything in particular?
We talked about verse 7 with where it beareth all things,
Mm-hmm.
how you're looking at different people, kind of like what you were
Mm-hmm.
talking
Yeah,
about, and
yeah.
kind of staying on the surface. But we kind of do it with a different aspect of we just don't know the whole circumstances.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it's hard to, people just don't open up very much anymore. And
You're
so we
right.
just can't understand sometimes the reasoning and what's going on.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone could hear that, but we don't know what others are going through a lot of times, or maybe we don't know the whole story, and so sometimes that can hold us back from reaching out to that person. And it is hard, especially,
But not to judge because you don't know the
yes,
circumstances.
and not to judge them, yeah, because we don't know the circumstances. That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, so thank y'all for having that conversation. Again, I think it always helps when we can admit that there are places we know we can do better. It helps us on our way to doing something about it. Putting feet to our words, I think, is what we heard. So let's look at this last characteristic. Love is enduring. And endure means it will continue, it'll last. And so, verse 8, charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. Prophecy, tongues, and knowledge will all go away one day, right? There'll be no need for them. They're not permanent gifts. We see here, tongues will cease, prophecies will fail. Why? Because they'll be accomplished. Knowledge will vanish. We'll have perfect knowledge. And love will last forever. God is love. And I got ahead of myself, for we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. And then let's look at verse 11. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. We expect children to act like children, right? I mean, we do. And we expect them to grow up at some point, right? To mature, to begin to think like an adult. And it's the same thing in our lives as believers. When we first become a believer, we're like children in the faith. We don't know until we get into the Word and study. We mature through the reading of the Word, hearing the preaching of the Word, participating in Bible studies, learning from each other. I mean, all the things that cause us to grow in our faith. We should be maturing as Christians. If we're not, do a little self-assessment of yourself every once in a while and say, am I in a different place than I was a year ago, 2 years ago? And if you're not, you might need to do a course correct. And that might involve in all those things we just mentioned, right? Getting in the Word, making sure we're under sound preaching and being involved in Bible studies and all that. We'll never be perfect. We know that until we get to heaven. And in this life, we should continue our growth as a believer. And then verse 12, for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as I'm known. Our faith will become sight one day, right? We look forward to that day. Especially, I don't know about y'all, but I look forward to it more and more this day and time. And then verse 13, and now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. So again, the greatest of these is love, and that's what we're talking about here. So I'll begin closing with this thought. It's about loving our fellow humans, our church family, ensuring that we're operating in love in our gifts, in our ministries. And so I'll finish telling you how that first night of Griefshare went, because I was so worried, and I had that moment when I thought, oh, what if one person shows up, or what if two people show up? And I was like, well, if that's what happens, that's exactly who God wanted there, right? And it didn't help that I was looking online to see how many people were registered, and guess how many people were registered? Zero. So I came in here on that first night. I had prayed. I had really got myself into a different place about being involved in the Griefshare Ministry. And lo and behold, there was one lady outside waiting when I got here. So that was a good sign, right? And I got here really early. And she was, oh my goodness, she was the sweetest little thing. She just immediately began sharing with me her grief story, and she was so worried about coming. She said, I can't talk without crying, and she was just the sweetest thing. And ladies began to come in early. And so we ended up having 8 ladies in that this was last Monday, and there was just a different spirit in the room. It was a different vibe in the room. It was like these ladies had already began establishing this connectedness. There was a lot of camaraderie in the group. They were helping each other, and it was just very different. And maybe it was my perspective. Maybe that's what the difference was, right? I had really got myself to a different. Well, I hadn't done it. The Lord showed me that there was a different way that I should be thinking about it, and it was in love, in using my gift of mercy in this ministry. So we had a wonderful first night, and so be praying about that. These ladies they're going through some rough stuff, getting through their grief, and lift them up in prayer when you think about it, those 8 ladies. And it's easy to say, and I talked about this a little bit earlier when I talked about personality types. It's real easy to say, well, I hear you talking about love and loving each other and all those verses we looked at, but I don't love easily. I've been hurt. You don't know what that person did to me. Let's think about it a little bit deeper here. As Christians, we're taught to love one another. By who? By God, right? We have His Word. And so God the Father taught us by sending His Son, right? How to love. God the Son taught us by giving His life for us and by commanding that we love one another. Jesus said that was the second greatest commandment, right? To love your neighbor as yourself. And then the Holy Spirit teaches us to love one another by pouring God's love into our hearts. Love enriches, it edifies, and it endures. And it does these things in our relationships, in our ministries, and in all it touches. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we just thank you so much for the word that you have for us as we study this chapter. God, I just pray that you'll help each one of us apply everything that we heard today into our lives in the way that we love each other loving through our spiritual gift, loving through our ministry. Lord, I thank you so much for what you've done for me so far, just in a little bit of time. And I just pray that you will be with this Griefshare Ministry, that you'll continue to help these ladies get through their grief. I pray that you'll help each one of these ladies that's in this room today to work on what you pointed out to them today, where they could do better. And Lord, I praise you where they're already doing a wonderful job. And Lord, I pray that same thing for anybody who might be watching this live or anybody who may watch it in the future. God, I pray that you'll just get me out of the way and that people won't focus on me and what I say, but they'll focus on what they hear from you and from your word. And Lord, it's in Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. Thank you.